Welcome to this episode of the On Patrol podcast, episode 17. As always, I've got it's Windhurst production with
Fighting Kentucky.
Yep. And as you see, it's just two of us right now, but we're shortly going to be joined with a panel of TO game organizers for competitive historical wargaming from around the world, to kind of share and peel back the curtain of how things are run, what it is, and why you should do it and join in on it, and why it's a great aspect to the historical community. But before that, we always have our initial section of every episode, our alibis, caveats, and piggybacks. So last episode 16, we talked about bolt action version 3. We've gotten some comments about clarifications on some of the rules, as well as asking for more information. And just to kind of clarify, it wasn't a deep dive, so we weren't trying to get too deep into the rules and exactly how every nuanced rule works and is affected, or how it can impact the difference between casual games and competitive games. Additionally, we can't share too much information because our access that one of us might have to these kind of rules is very limited and restricted. And so what we can share, is kind of limited. So if you're viewing this and version 3 has come out, then you'll have all the information. Or if you're viewing this before version 3 has dropped, just be patient and you'll get all the details there you're missing, or that we might not have covered to the level you were hoping we would. Kentucky, do you have any other alibis, caveats?
No, it's great discussion. We wanted to kind of get ahead of what we saw as the internet panic on kind of the theme of ours is, we come at it from two different angles, whether it be competitive events or casual bolt action. So we both have two separate kind of interests in that. But then also a lot of people were judging something on a soundbite. And so our biggest intent was to, if you hear one thing about a points cost or you hear a certain mechanic and you don't think about how the fluidity of the game has changed, you will run off, and it'll become a witch hunt on why it's good or why it's bad. I think the biggest thing that we want you to take away is, regardless of whether you're the casual player or the competitive player, I think there's a lot of goodness in the new rule set. And I think there's a lot of, we saw a trend going upwards from our games that we played with it. Again, looking forward to kind of getting that out and doing a deep dive on it later on. But we're trending, obviously towards a good direction with that rule set. We look forward to this discussion today, and we really look forward to engaging with the globe, with Peter, Andrew from Chicago Dice couldn't make it, but Peter West from Australia, Jacob from out in California, and Russ from the UK. All great TOs and people that are breaking brush and doing great things on the events. And so we wanted to really kind of, it's very on topic in my mind with version 3 and its release and events and lists and armies. And so we hope you enjoy the discussion today as we kind of embark on that. But I got nothing else. I look forward to hearing your feedback from the end of this episode. And I look forward to the discussion ahead.
Yep.
Everybody, welcome back to episode 17. This is the On Patrol podcast. I am here with competitive historical wargaming royalty. All right, royalty. We'll introduce those members who are joining us and are looking forward to talking to the topic of competitive historical wargaming. And so one of the things that we wanted to stress and pull on today is, you hear about events, you hear about, us as historical wargamers, or somebody that's kind of curious about it, or somebody that is a futuristic or fantasy wargamer coming over to some of these competitive historical wargames and learning about, the historical part of wargaming. And what we really wanted to do is take people from all over the globe, and especially the most knowledgeable gentlemen, which they may disagree with, but they are, I guarantee it, to kind of help us navigate and Sherpa us through this world of what is competitive historical wargaming and what are the benefits, of that. And a quick 30-second soundbite overview is, most casual historical wargamers will like a period, will like a battle, will like an era, and will collect armies, will mostly play pitched battles or scenarios based on that period, that era, or that conflict. And most competitive gamers will, play events and scenarios that are written in the book, come up by TOs, but somewhat will have a sense of fairness, and will use those armies, whether through a task organization or a point system, to kind of see balance. And so what happens when those two worlds collide? And we get the competitive wargaming with a backdrop of a historical era, period, or conflict. And so the hypothesis is today is, what are the benefits, what are the cons of a competitive historical wargaming, whether you're a competitive gamer, a casual player, or somebody that's curious and interested, or you've just heard everything in the world about these rule sets. And a little bit of the backdrop is we're probably going to use bolt action to navigate that today, but these principles, I believe, could be applied to Saga, Flames of War, any kind of historical game that's got, that backdrop, but is used in competitive type of events and tournaments. So without further ado, what I'd like for these giants, of the competitive scene, is to kind of introduce themselves and give you that few minutes to tell you about, who they are, how long they've been wargaming, and kind of what their background in that is. And so we will start with the man himself, all the way from down under. I don't know why his Skype camera isn't upside down, because he's on the bottom of the globe. It doesn't make sense to my puny army brain. So I'll let him introduce himself, though. Peter, if you want to, please take it away.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate the introduction. Peter, I'm from Australia, mainly play bolt action. I've been wargaming for about 20 years, but I've been running bolt action events since 2018. So I've got a fair bit of experience in certainly running bolt action events. And I play a pretty eclectic mix of games. But historical wise, I guess I'm playing V5 for Victory at the moment. And I like the other Studio Tomahawk games, muskets and in the Muskets and Tomahawks line. So I do a fair bit of historical gaming. And as I say, I've been running events since 2018, usually for about 5 years. I was running 2 large bolt action events a year. Took a bit of a break around 2020, and I came back to Cancon this year in 2023. So the Cancon event is somewhere usually in the area of about 50 to 80 people. So I give you some sense of my background.
That's unreal. An 80-person event, that's crazy. The one, I talked to Rob a little bit about this. The one kind of question we also wanted to know is, it'll help people kind of understand what is a little bit more about you as the gamer. What is your favorite unit, or, individual figure or unit that you've painted that's in your collection?
So it's probably, for those of you who've heard me on Brad Morin's podcast, we did an episode on Fallschirmjäger a couple of years ago, and that's largely because for some reason I'm very fascinated by Fallschirmjäger. I've got a Fallschirmjäger army in everything from 6mm through to 28mm, and I play them in multiple games. So I don't know why. I think that both the history, the eliteness of they started out elite anyway. The elite sort of nature of the unit, but the fact they fought on every front in virtually every battle also makes them the ultimate wargaming army for World War II anyway, because there's no battle you can't play Fallschirmjäger in. So when it comes to World War II gaming, as I did with bolt action, my first army is almost always Fallschirmjäger.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What a great army as well. We'll kick it over, kind of same questions to get everybody in the audience to kind of know the panel that we're looking at. We'll kick it over to Russ from the UK. Russ, go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Okay, so my name's Russ. I'm primarily involved with a club here called Southend-on-Sea Wargaming, and they've got a website which is sswg.co.uk, and I mentioned that because if you want to see some of the pictures of the tables and the battles we run, you can go there and you can see what we're up to. I'm just a member. I'm not the chairman or anything. People seem to think I'm in charge of it. I'm definitely not, but I am quite involved. I wargamed up to about the age of 18, and then, like a lot of people, I stopped. I discovered other things that I thought were interesting, and then my sons dragged me back into wargaming about 10 years ago. So I had a 20-year hiatus, and I'm back now. Like Peter, I was primarily, and still am really, a historical wargamer. Napoleonics. We do a bit of American Civil War, but primarily Napoleonics. Then I got dragged into World War II through Flames of War. And then we switched to bold action, to be honest, because we preferred painting the figures. So, and then we realised what a good game set it is, and how well it actually lends itself to tournament play, which we can discuss later. So I kind of gone all in for the time being on that. Do other things occasionally. To my embarrassment, some of the systems I play, our club is so well run, I will turn up at a big game that's been organised. I won't even know what system we're playing. People just throw you in and say, "Don't worry about it.
Roll dice.
Roll dice." Exactly, which is great. So that's kind of my involvement there. And in terms of tournaments, I don't run anything on the scale of Peter, but we run 2 events a year. And where we're different, we run team events. It's very hard to find team events for bolt action, which is kind of our USP. And we run one in February, which is called Three Good Men, and that's normally about 30 players. 36 players, and that's very themed. So all the army lists are themed. You score points for theme. You have to stay in theme, and it's still competitive, but it's themed. And then in October we run the international one, which is World Open War, and that's coming up October 26th, 27th. That will be 48 players across 16 teams from all over the world, including a US team. So that's what I'm up to.
That's awesome.
Oh, favourite figure.
Yeah.
Sorry, your favourite figure. Sure, that's like picking your favourite kid.
Period.
On World War II, I suppose my favourite army at the moment on World War II is I've got a US Marine Corps army, which you probably won't like one bit, army. And there is a figure from a company called Assault Group called Big John, and it looks like John Wayne from Sands of Iwo Jima, and it's a lovely figure. And the army's all based with sand from Okinawa as well when I was out there last time. So I grabbed sands and pet bottles and brought it back. So that's probably my favourite unit in terms of aesthetics.
What set of Napoleonics do you play? What set?
Art de la Guerre is the one we tend to use,
okay.
but we play it in 28mm size because we've got 18-foot long tables. We tend to play 28mm rather than 15mm or whatever other options you could pick.
Are you legally blind after painting that many Napoleonics? I assume
I nearly did. I had to paint an Italian brigade for it because we didn't have an Italian brigade, and their uniform is all white, and it is the worst thing I've ever had to paint because if you don't shade and highlight and do all that stuff, it looks awful. And I promised myself I was never going to paint Napoleonics again after that. But it's probably why I do more bolt action now. It's easier to paint.
Yeah, everybody, but except like Peter's Fallschirmjäger and the Splinter camo and everything you have to do. It's like beige and green, and Soviets are brown. It works out. So that's awesome, Russ. L'Artiger, I'll have to look it up. A lot of people have talked about it. That's good stuff. Andrew, we had another guest who was supposed to be on here today, Andrew V from Chicago Dice. Unfortunately, he has a 3-week-old new baby, and just as I was telling everybody before he hopped on here, he had to go to that down order just to keep, for preservation of life. So him and his wife, I'm sure, tag team in that, and he regrets that he couldn't make us. I'm left it open. We've sent the link to him if he can jump on or he's not too sleep deprived. But hopefully he's doing a rally and he's bouncing back. But what we'll move on to is we have people Australia, we have England obviously, and we were supposed to have kind of a Midwest or East Coast with Andrew, but we have somebody who has woken up at the crack of dawn. I think it's like 10 p.m. in Australia for Peter, so not too horrible. You limeys, Rob and Russ, you guys made out. Because it's like midday. It's a little bit early here for me, kind of when I normally wake up. But Jacob from California is, I think it's like there. I hear a rooster in the background. It's like 4 or 5 a.m. there. Jacob, go ahead and you can introduce yourself as well. I appreciate you being here.
5 a.m. after running a run shot for the first time last night, so quite early for me. I'm Jacob Shober. I've been wargaming for at least probably around 10 to 15 years, give or take. First, as most people get their fix in, is 40K, Warhammer 40,000. Back in the day, But then John Russell with and Eric Fontaine out in the Midwest got me hooked on bolt action, and I've been looking for a World War II war game for ages and a day, because I do World War II reenacting as well, both as the good guys and the bad guys. And so I got hooked onto bolt action. I played a lot back out in Missouri, which is where I lived before. When I moved out here about 6 years ago to California, John just flat up asked me, "Hey, you want to start actually running things? You want to actually become a sergeant and then become a raider?" All terms for people who help run things and help their local stores and local tournament scene get up and running. And I was like, "Yeah, let's go for it." So I started running different war games at the local gaming stores and at the conventions that pop up out here. I'm currently at Strategicon, which happens 3 times a year. It's President's Day, Memorial Day, and Labor Day weekend. It's great scene, great people here. A lot of familiar faces once you start coming a lot of stuff I've been doing with bolt action. I've been doing tournaments, both in a convention setting as well as in a local game store setting. We also did with the HMGS PSW, which is the Historical Miniature Gaming Society Pacific Southwest. We did bolt action summer. COVID obviously put a damper on a lot of things, but things are starting to pick up once more, and we got a great crew going. A lot of things I also do are demos and teaching people how to play. So I was actually at San Diego Comic-Con not too long ago, where we were invited to actually demo different games and have people play and teach people how to play. There's a scenario I actually came up with called Bolt Action Boot Camp, which teaches people how to play bolt action, about 80% of it in 10 minutes or less. Just a few quick stations had people play, almost a complete boot camp setup with firing lines and places where poor people with pin markers get to run laps. But otherwise, having a great time out here wargaming and teaching people how to wargame.
That's awesome.
Thank you. My favorite of historicals is bolt action, again, because I have the strong love of the World War II era, and the reenacting and the wargaming side kind of feed off each other. I'm a bit of a treadhead. I love tanks. So my favorite units are actually the really esoteric or the weird and strange vehicles you get, like the T-35, the 5-turreted Russian tank, the 150 howitzer that you only see in North Africa, that tracked vehicle, and those kind of tanks. Just weird things that you don't usually see in tournaments or don't usually see in competitive play. I like bringing them along because they're weird and cool.
That's awesome. No, and I know you're doing a lot of good stuff out there in California, and you've run events, you have that experience and everything, but you're also somebody, you're the crack dealer on the street. You're getting people hooked, even outside of events and everything. So that's really good stuff that you're doing out there. Well, we have the panel kind of set. We have everybody, from different walks of life, different parts of the globe. Again, sorry that Andrew couldn't be here. He does send his regards. But what I want to do is I talked to the panel before this, me and Rob did, and had some messages back and forth. And so we wanted to kind of kick ideas to go back to this lens of competitive historical wargaming. And one of the first questions I'm going to kind of pose to the panel is, what are the best things about competitive wargaming events? And, please, gents, use your examples. I've heard a lot about people when they get older, which I myself am. You don't have the time that you did when you were a kid to hobby or when you were a young adult. And so now it's I've heard Patch say this in Australia, Peter, where it's a good way to get 3 games in a day or 5 games in 2 days, kind of guaranteed. Or it's a good way to meet new people. It's a good way to discover new ways to play the game, right? If you run into that opposing army that you're like, I would have never thought 80 inexperienced guys would be a good tactic, but it is. Or, be as inspired by there's a lot of FJ armies I've seen on the table, kind of going back to Peter as well, where just the camo, the way they do that, or we'll look at an opponent at a competitive event and be like, man, that is such a good style. Or hey, why did you paint these pants blue, this shade of green? And it's like, well, actually, I found this old Osprey. This is what they kind of wore. Or I've been to most sometimes competitive gamers that are in this historical background really have their niches that they like, and when they bring those to competitive events, when they're good, it can really be a combat multiplier for the group. So kind of pushing it to the group, and Peter, you'll kind of sub in here for Andrew. What are the best things about competitive historical, wargaming events?
Well, I think you've touched on a lot of them, but I mean, my experience is that it's a great opportunity to get a community together. So it's not just the individuals, but I think it's also about the community. And Russell can probably speak more about this with teams games, but it's about building a community around your game, Bolt Action, meeting people who love the game the same way you do, and getting a chance. I mean, as much as fun it is throwing dice. I mean, from my walking around the conventions and games events I've run, it's as much people talking about and connecting about the game they love, and talking about playing it, and talking about their experiences, and almost watching it like it's a movie playing out, and talking about what they're seeing on the table and the story around that. So for me, at least as a starting point, it's a way of just sort of gathering that community together and having a great opportunity for everyone to talk about this game that they love so much. And in some respects, playing it's almost become secondary at certain points. But that's really one of the great things, particularly about a big convention, because it brings together people from very different ways of playing the game and very different ways of viewing the game. So look, I would sort of offer that as the starting point of what I love about running conventions. It's an opportunity to bring for everyone to come together and enjoy some time with the game that they love, and share that with people, because otherwise you often, gaming communities are often quite small. It's, particularly historical ones. Your gaming community might be half a dozen people, and you probably played them all several times. And so an opportunity to meet and talk to a whole bunch of different people about the historical aspects, the gaming aspects, the painting aspects. It's just, it's a wonderful opportunity, and particularly when you've got a big event.
Awesome. No, Russ or Jacob, thoughts on weighing on that? What are the best things that you find about these events and competitive, events?
Okay, I'll jump in. I basically agree with everything Peter said. The only thing I would add and emphasise maybe is the social side of it. It's an opportunity because you might be travelling to somewhere that's not close to where you live, and you'll have other people travelling there as well. So on some events, you stay overnight for a couple of days. It's like a mini holiday. You just go and play the game you love, really enjoy that side, and then you go out and you drink and you go to restaurants and you socialise with other people who are like-minded. So.
You drink to your victories, or you help your defeats mellow out, right?
I just think you drink.
Yeah. To be honest, I think the drinking's probably caused a lot of defeats.
So
on the following day. So,
before Jacob jumps in on this, so Peter, you're talking a lot about those kind of local communities, and Russ, you kind of alluded to kind of the more remote ones. Jacob, I know you said you run a lot of convention events and local events. On this subject of what's great about it, do you feel like the differences in those kind of events have their own unique things that are great about them, or are they pretty universal across your convention events versus your local in-store events?
There's a lot of bit of both, I would say. With your convention events, you really start seeing the diversity of people's armies and what they've done with them, from super simple ones, which, look, I just bought these guys yesterday. They're gray. They're Germans. Sure, they're on the field. To, I researched this particular Indian unit, and so I made sure to get all these special models just to be able to model this particular Indian unit. Here's the entire unit's history. Here's all I can do about it. And just seeing how people get really, really passionate about the game in the grand convention tournament scene is great. With your local scene, you actually see rather than a snapshot of someone's wargaming career as you would with a tournament at a convention. You get to actually see them grow. You get to actually see them grow from, hey, here's my gray dudes I just assembled yesterday, to, look, I've actually been doing research about these guys. I special ordered this unit over here so I can actually put them as part of my army and really grow in terms of the hobby and in terms of their own personal view of history is always great to see. So you get to see a long line of that wargamer in that local scene and make friends with them, teach them how to play, get them into new armies, get them into new systems, play with them over and over again, bounce ideas off each other. Whereas with the conventional tournament scene at conventions, we only see that one brief snapshot. You might see them next year. You might see them several months down the road and catch up friends just like old times, because I know all war gamers, instant friends as soon as they say hi to each other. But you really only see snapshots of those people's lives as they go through, as they build their army, as they have whatever force they bring. So both are actually great in terms of being able to get into the hobby and get others into the hobby and keep up with, I would say keeping up with the Joneses, but keep up with your fellow wargamers all around you. It's really great fun on both accounts.
What that's a great, the theme of it, what everybody's saying on the competitive events, whether it be at your local shop or big cons. What is everybody? This is sometimes where you only see that person that time of year, that single convention game, right? You're dispersed, or you don't live apart, or maybe they can line out that con. And that's something I've noticed about events. It's great to see the one guy, he's done something else, or he's gotten, he's become the supervillain. He's got Gurkhas now. I'm kidding. But what is the farthest, in talking about this, it's a good time for people to come together at all three of your events. What is the farthest you've seen somebody come, that's even consistently coming back? A few hours, they hop on a plane, they have to leave their country. Posing that to the group, what's the farthest you've seen somebody come to kind of be engaged in this community?
From the US. So we've got guys coming in from Atlanta, and I think it's St. Louis as well, coming all the way over to the east of England. So that is by far the furthest I've seen. But we have got guys from Denmark, from Spain, from Germany, from Italy. So we've got a mix of people coming from all over the place.
That's for the international tournament?
Yeah, and I will travel as well. So I'll go up to, I go to Scotland, I go to Spain, I go to Germany as well, and we have guys fly down from Scotland as well for the tournament. And for more local tournaments, you will still see people traveling, 400 miles.
Yeah, it's a couple. That's like 2 states over for us.
Yeah.
Peter, what about Cancon? How far do you see people come?
Well, it's one of the great honours, I think, of running Cancon, because it is probably Australia's leading event. We get people travelling a fair distance across Australia. So we get people from Western Australia, South Australia. So, in time, that's probably about 5 hours of flying time. Distance, it's bigger than crossing the US, but anyway. So it's... but it's great. We don't get a lot of international players, obviously, coming to events in Australia. It's a major challenge and cost to get to Australia. We occasionally get a New Zealand player, and Tasmanian players, they tell me, aren't actually international, so apparently it's still part of Australia. But no, look, we get, it's one of the great things about running Cancon. We get people coming a fair distance because it is that opportunity. It's, big events like Cancon are the sort of place where the best of the best gather to test their armies against each other. So you do get people traveling a fair distance, which is great to see. And the other side of that coin is because they are coming such long distances, they're bringing their best game, they're bringing their best army, which makes what makes these big events so great. The armies look great, and the people have done their best to bring their A game.
No, that's awesome. I really, that's awesome event. I think the theme of the community is tied into all of your answers. That's really good stuff. Here with kind of mixing the questions and people who are that will take the lead on it. Looking over, and Jacob, do you have any kind of last thoughts on that as well? I don't want to move on without. If you have anything as far as, what's the farthest you've seen somebody? California is a decently sized state. We're in little podunk Kentucky right here. So what's the farthest you've seen somebody drive or fly in to Strategicon or some of your events as well?
So for Strategicon, I've seen people come down from Northern California, which, might not seem like much, but that's at least a 7-8 hour drive, a 3-4 hour flight. For some of the bigger events with, the Las Vegas Open, the NorCal Open, the SoCal Open, they're coming in internationally to come and play in those games. With LVO, I was able to go to there about a year and a half ago, I think it was, maybe 2 years. There's people coming out from Europe, people coming over from Asia. With a lot of the bigger events like that, people flying from the UK tend to. A lot of these smaller events, people come in just from the surrounding area. And even then, you could drive about 2.5 to 3 hours and you won't have left Los Angeles.
Yeah. Because you're stuck, and you haven't moved a mile because you're stuck in traffic.
So people actually drive good distances, and usually for daily tournaments and that kind of thing, and not big events, people stack on 3 hours to either end of their tournament going just to be able to get there and back again. Yeah,
people will drive a lot of distance. An underlying theme to this as well is you three gentlemen, run these events. So it's good. I think there's a little bit of a, you've created an environment and a community that has to just kind of at least be stated, where people will drive that far to take 5 losses in a row. It's because of the community that you gentlemen have created. So those are some discussion points we're going to get into in a little bit in the future here. But one of the kind of kicking back the questions, and where Andrew isn't with us today, rearranging, who will take lead. So Jacob, I'm going to kind of pose this question to start with you and then kick it around to the group. But let's talk about the bad. There's a lot of people listening to this podcast that we want to get interested into competitive historical wargaming, that are those casual players we talked about, or coming over from, a sci-fi or fantasy system. But what are the worst things, in your mind, and whether through examples? Let's talk about the horrors kind of up front, and we'll talk about ways later in the podcast that we can get after those things. But what are the worst things, or what are these stereotypes maybe that people see about competitive historical wargaming? So Jacob, pushing it back to you on that.
There's 2 bits, and one's really universal that you see no matter which wargame you're playing, whether it be historical, sci-fi, fantasy, anything. And that's your unfortunate power game. They usually come out the woodwork when it comes to tournament scenes. Mostly sometimes you actually recognize their faces because you recognize the army and because you recognize the power game they usually play. That's true, again, across the board with any kind of war game out there. Usually in larger tournaments, it's kind of dampened down because everyone else, you might not face that person. Smaller tournaments, you probably will face that person, unfortunately. And you see them next tournament and you automatically start groaning because you know exactly what you're going to be facing and exactly what kind of broken rule set they're going to be using to be able to play. Another thing that's quite unique with historical wargaming that all of us, I'm sure, struggle to break the stereotype and break the mold of it is that it's a bunch of old dusty guys. Old dusty guys that, sit and have those 3 magnifying glasses painting their guys. They bring it out looking all magnificent and don't really, I would say, interact with the wider group, especially if it's a convention or a tournament that's not only that particular war game, but other games, or even civilians walking through, just looking at different games and that kind of stuff. It can tend to be rather insular. But I know that a lot of us here and everyone on my side that I work with and everything like that, we're trying to break that mold to bring people into the historical war games and show it's actually a game for everyone. And not only a game for everyone in terms of being able to play, but a game for everyone because you're learning about your actual history, which is one of the biggest things about historical war games, I think, is making sure that history doesn't die out. And so bringing it to the next generation, bringing it to the younger audience is always a struggle because it's really hard to break that stereotype, but always something that's, I find a lot of us working towards.
No, that's a good point. Kicking it over to Russ and Peter now, what are those negative stereotypes that you've seen? And, I'm even asking you to draw on some examples. You guys are obviously champions of huge events and hobbies, and you've probably had people ask you questions like, hey, this kind of worries me, or that guy's an asshole, or, whatever the case may be, or wow, this is not for me. It seems too unfair, or something like that. And you guys have had to explain to them, I'm sure, a good deal, a lot. What are some, kind of examples of those negative stereotypes or things that you've kind of had to walk people through as you've done these events, and even other examples of kind of negative stereotypes that you may have seen and interacted with?
Okay. Well, for me, I guess one of the stereotypes is that the player base is going to be toxic. And the event will be toxic. And I think, and I don't want to disparage 40K, but I'm going to mention it. I have had so many people tell me that is the atmosphere. I don't know if it is, but I keep being told it is. I've never found that. When I've gone to 40K tournaments, local ones, it's been fine. But I've heard that can be really quite aggressive. And if you're being toxic, I guess the two things that annoy me are you get people who will argue every single rule. It's very rare, but you do come across them. And any rule that they're trying to get an advantage from, they will argue the rule. And you're like, okay, let's get the rule book again. Look, you can't do that. And it's like, I know you want to do it, but you can't. And like, yes, I can. Oh, you definitely get those types. Not many. And slow play. Slow play is a killer. And if it's by accident or someone's new to the game, it's absolutely fine. But I have occasionally come across people where you're like, I know what you're doing here. You want to work the clock down. But with that said, I've played around 200 games competitively as bolt action. And I reckon I've had maybe three bad games out of 200. So that's a pretty good rate. It's around 1%. So you'd be unlucky to get a really bad game.
Peter, what about you?
I think one of the things about competitive historical wargame events is that you've got an inbuilt tension because of the word historical, that you've got a spectrum of pure wargaming, that is just you play, it's an absolute game, you just play by the rules and the historical bit doesn't matter, all the way through to you've got gamers who are coming because the unit they're depicting was the one their grandfather fought in Tobruk, and this figure standing right here is the one representing my grandfather. And the fact that I have to face off on some completely ahistorical, unbalanced army that never would have taken the field in the real world causes them grief. So you've got it as a TO, particularly for historical events, you're always trying to sort of balance that. How far do you go down the spectrum of just saying, look, it's just a game, play whatever you want, do list however you want, don't care as long as it's legal according to the rules, versus the fact that, look, I know people are here because they're attracted to the historical side just as much as they care about the wargaming side. So the tension I've always had as a TO is how do you balance those? Where do you set that point so that you're getting people are still getting historical still getting competitive games, because that's, everyone's kind of there. You've said it's a competitive event, but you've got to retain some of the history, or what's the point? Why not just play World War II sci-fi? Why bother calling it even historical war game? So that's one of the big tension points I've always found, that I try and balance it. So, and I say in my packs that I am going to constrain some of the gaming aspects because I want it to have a more historical flavour. And this is not just a pure war game where you just can throw anything at the wall. I'm going to look at your lists and say that is not. It's not just whether it's whack or not. It's whether does it have any historical basis in reality whatsoever. Or are you just pulling my leg and you're just playing 40K and calling it bolt action? And I apologise to 40K players, but that's probably the big tension I always when I'm sitting down to do a pack. And one of the things people will tell you about gaming in Australia is we put a lot more rules around our historical wargaming in BA, and we limit what people can bring a lot more than in other BA communities.
Peter, that's a great point. I think that when I've talked about competitive historical wargaming and stuff like that, and I think Russ even mentioned this and Jacob mentioned this, it's, on the onset of this interview and this discussion is getting those players to understand what they're coming to. And everybody that lines up at a bolt action table, Games of War table, or a saga table, they've got something they're trying to get out of it, whether it's all the time they spend on that grandfather's unit or whatever. And so when they come there and they face something ahistorical, it can really give you a case of the feel bad seas, right? With 8 flak Verlings that the other opponent has, or whatever the case may be. And so knowing that at the onset is going to be a lot of the battle. And we'll talk about, TO and organizers, how you guys get involved. And I think you're alluding to it right now, which is awesome. But no, those are all great points. Does anybody have any other alibis, or Rob, any other questions on kind of the bad stereotypes of competitive historical wargaming and competitive wargaming, maybe at that?
So I've got a question I want to pose, because it's a nice opportunity since we have kind of around the world represented here. So Matthew and I did an entire episode on the controversy that can sometimes surround historical wargaming. And I think, one of the periods that gets the most flack is World War II, because you have very clear bad guys from the historical side. And I know in some of my non-tournament events, but just wargaming events, I know Matthew's had this in some of his events, catch flack from kind of the wargaming community, but a lot of times outside the wargaming community is like, oh, you got people representing Nazis or SS, or it's like you're just promoting violence. Have you all ever dealt with any of that in any of your events? Or is it's a very rare thing? Because we have seen it, so I'm just curious in your parts of the world if it ever comes up.
An example would be is I put Rommel on our best access award, and I gave Rommel out. I was like, who is the least, but everybody kind of admires as a general. And I was like, well, I'm not going to put, Hitler or Goebbels up there or Tojo. And so I was like, okay, Rommel, Desert Fox, pretty well respected even from the Allied side. And I was like, why are you glorifying a Nazi on an award or something like that? Or, what are other examples you've seen of that, or people won't play those armies?
Or if it doesn't happen at all, if it hasn't happened to you, that's good information.
I'm sure it hasn't happened, right? You guys just too good for
that. I've never seen it. I've never seen it. I've seen it once or twice, jokingly said, of other people's answers, but it's always jokingly. The other thing I'd say in Europe's quite interesting, because in Germany and France, you cannot put on your table, say, an SS unit that has got, say, swastika recognition flags on it, and they have got restrictions. So we have the opposite. We have Germans coming to our tournaments and going, wow, look, that guy's got an amazing second SS army. And so it's the opposite reaction we come across. I'll even play the most evil army. I'm even willing to play Soviets. So, I don't mind who I don't mind who I play. It's just a game after all. And someone's got to be the baddie. So
yeah, I haven't seen it at events a lot, but I mean, I have, the place where you mostly see it these days, I guess, on the Facebook pages, and it's not, where it sort of manifested itself most is probably in some of the terminology that was acceptable in World War II, say like Japs, which we would not allow to be used in our Facebook pages or our tournament context. So there's a little bit of that, but I haven't really seen anyone refuse to play a Waffen SS army or anything like that in our events. So I think that, without leaning into stereotypes, most historical war gamers are sort of in the over the mid-20s at least, and so I think that comes the degree of maturity with that, and I don't see many people quibbling over and people know what they're getting into, so I haven't seen many issues.
That's good.
Jacob, what are your thoughts from California, where we know, rationality and reason? I'm kidding, Jacob. I'm going to throw shots at everybody.
As a reenactor, you might have interesting insight.
Yeah, especially,
I've drunk some Kool-Aid out here, thankfully, because there's a lot of Kool-Aid to be had. But even out here, when you get actually into the wargaming scene, people kind of know what they get into. It's the only people that actually complain or actually look at it odd and strangely are people that have never rolled a dice in their life. Once you get into wargaming of any sort, once you start rolling those dice and playing those armies, yeah, there's going to be good guys and bad guys. I'm actually going to use an example of our World War II reenacting group, and one phrase that stuck with me forever and a day. Back when we were just getting into World War II reenacting back in Missouri in the 80s, my unit out there, the 38 Jaegers, so I was part of a German unit out there, one of the commanding officers went, one of the people at his job found out, and he was dragged into HR one day, and with the president of the company and HR and everything going like that, and he was asked, you're playing the bad guys, right? You know that? And he said, yeah. It's like, well, do you believe in any of that stuff? Do you secretly have, an Iron Cross and a Mein Kampf hanging in your closet or wherever the case may be? And he said, no, we're just trying to keep history alive and keep the memory alive just so that we do not forget. Have you ever played, as a kid, Cowboys and Indians? Being in the 80s, like, yeah, we played Cowboys and Indians. Have you tried playing it without the Indians? So a lot of people go, and the HR and the president was fine and dandy with that. And a lot of people know, a lot of war gamers know, the moment you start rolling dice, there has to be good guys and bad guys. Not only, it's part of the human psyche almost to have that good guy or bad guy group. Even if you're facing a bad guy versus bad guy or a good guy versus good guy, you have that dichotomy that actually appears in any kind of war game, and people know that, historical war gamers especially. So to us, it becomes, from everyone else here, it becomes a matter of keeping the memory of the history, but not believing or following along with any of it. You are not your army, even if you might be, as you said, the 2nd SS or the 12th SS or anything like that, or Russian units or the Japanese units or anything of the sort. You're not that. You're playing that, but you're not that. And most people that I've seen know that. I've never really come across anyone who's disparaged playing. And this is even coming from someone who does a lot of demos at events like Comic-Con. And I have my Germans and Americans out. Never once have I had anyone, throw a fit or anything of the sort about having German models out in the field.
That's good. All right.
Peter, you had something, or?
I was just going to say that there's only one time it's ever actually arisen in an event, and that was when someone had an objective, which was an objective of a German firing squad shooting somebody. And it wasn't so much it was the Germans, but it was just we decided it wasn't an appropriate, tasteful objective. So that's the only time I ever had to ask someone to remove something.
So we pulled out the poker chip and just placed it there and was like, okay, this is the objective now. Okay, that's and we talk about this in a whole episode of kind of controversial wargaming, like what is it, and especially with the historical context. But I do, that's great that we kind of really kicked around that idea. Kicking over, question 3 and rearranging this. We talked about who enters that, even from the point of Jacob, where I'm sure both Peter and Russ have kind of done demos or gotten people into bolt action. But do you feel like historical wargamers are apt in diving into competitive wargaming, and kind of why or why not? And Russ, I'm kicking this straight to you, in England, and to give kind of your insights first, and then we'll kick it around to Peter and Jacob.
I suppose the main reason for doing it is people like to compete, don't they? Even if you're doing something historically. With that said, historical wargaming has a history and culture of actually being more reenactment based. So when you're doing a Napoleonic battle, you're not really playing it to win. You're doing it just to get the figures on the table and to see the feel for it and the aesthetics. But you don't line up thinking, oh, I'm going to win Austerlitz by doing this, and I'm going to flank. It's a different kind of atmosphere, but you can do both. I wouldn't dream of trying to do Art de la Guerre as a competitive game, but bolt action in particular lends itself to that. You can get the game done, completed properly in 2.5 hours, 2 hours 15. It's balanced. It's got a great rule set, which means you can get mismatches, but they're less of an issue than other systems. And for historical wargamers, you might have spent all this time painting this amazing army. You want to go and use it. You want people to see it. Yeah. So I think that's another element of it. Just, wow, I've got this amazing army. What do I do with it now? Does it just go in a display cabinet, or do I do something with it? And I think that's one part of it as well. for historical players.
No, great kind of answer. I really agree with you on, it's a reenactment with maybe the participants feeling that tension on the table of, hey, this is Chancellorsville in the Civil War, or this is the Battle of Dunkirk. You get the feel of you're being surrounded, rather than the competitive gaming. It would tend to think that historical war gamers are not apt to playing competitive war games. But then kicking over to Peter and Jacob with that kind of same question, what do you feel about that? Are historical war gamers kind of primed to go into that competitive wargaming, or other kind of interesting thoughts on that?
I think wargamers in general, once you start rolling those dice, it becomes a quick addiction. And usually that, again, goes into the whole competitive scene. Human beings by nature are a competitive species, so we like the competition of it all. I have seen a lot of people like specific narrative events, but not narrative events to the size of going to a convention or going to a big event or a big tournament to actually play for the narrative reasons. It's a lot more to play for the competitive reasons when they're going to the big events. The smaller, more narrative events are a lot more friendly towards the local scene, the local hobby stores and that kind of stuff, where you can get a group, doing an escalation league, but also a narrative escalation league, going through the battles in a particular order or whatever the case may be. It's also what I've seen a lot of times is actually almost region locked. That certain regions, I can only really say of the United States, but certain regions have more of a drift towards the competitive side, and certain regions have more of a drift towards the beer and pretzels, the just small in your garage, having fun, maybe doing a historical scenario or whatever the case may be. It's really interesting. People come from all over the world to Peter and Russell and your guys' large tournaments and that kind of thing. And I've seen people coming with that more, you come from this area or this country or whatever the case may be, you have this kind of outset. A lot more people from here are a lot more likely to have that complete unit history, or my grandparents, served in this way, so I'm actually honoring them by doing this, as opposed to different areas where you see people coming with that great horde. And I'm not just talking about the South when it comes to Civil War, that just want to play. That, I'm playing Germans. I don't know what they are. I picked these units. They probably never served together. Who cares? I'm playing Germans. I want to roll dice. I want to be competitive. Let's go.
What do you, Peter, your thoughts on that, on, historical wargamers, by their very nature, do you think they're apt for these competitive events, or the latter?
Look, I think bolt action, which I'm drawing on, is perhaps in a bit of an interesting space. I mean, I don't know a lot about the wargaming history in the US, but I know a bit about the UK and obviously Australia. And, sort of the idea of competitive wargaming is, I think, actually relatively new and probably pretty much started with Flames of War. And it's really only been recently that we've had sort of very tight, competitive, focused historical rule sets like Saga and Bolt Action. And I think Bolt Action in particular is an interesting place because it's almost, one might argue, or I don't know whether it's true or not, been deliberately designed to take people from 40K into historical wargaming because of the alignment with the rules, the similar sort of play style, and some of the common designers. And so I think Bolt Action sort of interesting as a competitive historical game. It's not a sort of game where you've taken a set of historical rules and sort of tried to make them competitive, which is sort of what we've done in the past with a lot of rules. This was one that was, I think, deliberately designed to be competitive, and it's brought in a competitive crowd for that reason. And it's certainly something I've seen over the evolution of events in Australia. We started out with a very historical crowd when I started running Bolt Action events back in 2018, to the point where I ran it last year, and it was, I would say, a majority what I would call a competitive crowd. That is, people who had come into Bolt Action with a competitive mindset, as opposed to historical players who are also going to play a bit competitively. So it's an interest. Bolt action, I think, is an interesting game when you talk about competitive wargaming, because I think it is actually attracting a quite deliberately competitive crowd. But from a TO perspective, that gives you the added, as I was talking about earlier, how do you get that balance right? Because you've got some really people who want to play hardcore competitive in your events, and I think that's just something we're increasingly seeing, and it'll be interesting when version 3 comes out. I think it's going to nudge us even more in that direction, to be honest.
Peter, those are great points, and I really think so. One of the things that I remember, I grew up in a wargaming family and a historical wargaming family, and competitive war games kind of seeped in there early on with what I think was WRG, War Games Research Group, with the Ancients. And that I saw, at a lot of tournaments and events were ancient kind of war games that were in a competitive style, and that's how those rule sets, it was up to 7th edition was when people played it the most, but they were historically flavored. Obviously, a lot of work went into those rule sets, but they definitely, you had a points and you had kind of a competitive era of the armies. There were some armies that were just trash no matter what, which is what we see in other rule sets. But I would totally agree that, Flames, that the more that we've progressed, it has gotten tighter in, this is kind of the ins and outs of the rule set, a little bit more specifics, and a lot of that coming over. I think everybody's alluded to, and I think Peter, you did a great job tying into that second question, kind of follow-up is, where are most of these competitive historical wargamers coming from? I feel, in the central to eastern part of the region of the United States, that we're getting a lot of 40K people that are either burnout by codex creep or whatever the case may be. They throw their dice against the wall in their sea of plastic gray, and they're like, okay, I'm going to play 1940K, as it's been colloquially called, the bolt action. But kind of pushing that to you guys, do you see a majority of people that are playing bolt action now today, or from a more competitive, rule set that's sci-fi or fantasy? Or do you feel, and what do you think that disparity is? Is it 80-20? Is it 60-40? If you even see that way, and kicking that kind of back to you three, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, okay, I'll jump in. I don't know. I kind of assume it is 40K players coming in, but actually there's not a lot of evidence for that, not in our area anyway. There are parts of the UK, as you say, it's regional. I do think if you move up to the Midlands and north of England, maybe you're getting 40K players coming over there. I see it a lot less in the south. It tends to be historical players who are coming over. So there's a real mix. And as you say, by region, there can be a big difference.
London's ivory tower of historical wargamers.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but certainly the areas surrounding London do seem to be more historical. That's just an observation. I imagine there's British people who completely disagree with that, but that's my observation on it. So,
Peter and Jacob, what are your thoughts on, do you feel that's a majority, and what do you think the range is of people coming over from competitive games, if you had to put a percentage on it?
I would say it is. It used to be a lot more of the case of people coming heavily over from Warhammer 40K, Warhammer Fantasy, anything like that. They have the experience of rolling the D6 from that. They get the experience rolling from bolt action. I mean, I was one of the converts when I first started. But a lot more nowadays, and this might just be kind of a survivor's bias of all the demos and everything like that I run. A lot of times I'm just seeing completely new people, never having rolled a D6 in their life, never having rolled a dice in their life, not really knowing how to do wargaming, and getting bolt action as their first hook into wargaming in general. Referring back to a few of the questions from before, one of the bad things, and one of the things that now is lending these historical games more to a tournament scene or more to a competitive scene, is the balance in the rule sets. A lot of the original war games, or a lot of the original historical war games, were more designed to reenact a certain scenario or reenact a certain battle, and less designed to be balanced across the board, so that you can play 1939 Poland versus 1945 Japanese and still have a balanced combat, which is what you get with bolt action. So the ease of getting into it, especially ease the wallet, because that's unfortunately a lot of war gamers' real sticking point is how easy it is on the wallet, of getting into bolt action and getting into a lot of the GDubs or the historicals that we got, is the sticking point for a lot of people, is that one, they can learn the rules super easy from never having rolled dice in their life, and then two, they can see the price and go, okay, that's not that bad to get that army or to get the complete starter army or whatever the case may be, and I'm mostly ready from there. So that's drawing a lot of people in directly from nothing to Boltec or nothing to these competitive historical war games.
That's really interesting. I like how you use price point to talk about players. And then Peter, I know you kind of mentioned, like you're getting a lot of competitive people, I think from 40K in Australia to come over. What would you put as the percentages, and is it trending? Are you seeing more people based on price point come over, or are you seeing just more converts come over?
So look, when started events back in version 1, I would have said the percentage is about 50% historical players who are playing something else historical and picked up both bolt action. About 50% of the players were new / people returning to wargaming at a certain point in their life. So it's generally people who were 40K players who, kind of like Russell said at the beginning, had paused at some point, gone on with their life, and were returning, but they didn't want to return to 40K because either they were older and they didn't seem to fit in with the crowd, or because of cost reasons. And so that was what I was originally seeing. But, certainly over the last sort of 3 to 4 years, you're starting to see more people converting who are currently playing 40K or were recently playing 40K and are converting to bolt action for a combination of competitive different play. So just doing something different beyond 40K, either because they feel they've had enough of the 40K system, or they just want to do something a bit different, but they still want to play very competitively. So I'd now say we've gone from sort of like 50-50 to probably a third of move from competitive games, in particular 40K, new or people coming to gaming, and a sort of historical gamers who are still playing bolt action because they love the history aspect of it.
No, those are awesome points, and yeah, truly appreciate it. I think what we've done here in this first kind of hour is we've talked about the pros, we've talked about the cons, and we've talked a lot about the community and like who makes up the community. So people who are, apt to, whether they're a historical wargamer, a 40K convert like Jacob, or wherever, they know at least the lay of the land. What I want to pose next is, why should people do it if they should? And then I kind of want to pose this question. I'm going to flip the script a little bit on who I initially had the question targeted to. But I think, Peter, it's going to go to you. You mentioned a lot early on about the idea that you had stuff in your tournament pack, about how you described events and how you kind of set the stage for all comers, whether it's the bloodthirsty Gurkha paratroopers or the, hey, I really like 1939 Poland with the no anti-tank weapons, right? I just want to play that. And I think you kind of alluded to some control mechanisms there, which is going to be great. So the question is, right, who is the onus on to keep historical competitive events on track? The rule set, the TO, or the participant, or all of them, right? And so, Peter, I kind of kick that to you with getting after these stereotypes and these problem sets. What do you see as the best kind of way to chop that? And we'll all sit here for the last hour and just listen to you talk, Peter. No, I'm kidding.
God, no, nobody wants that. Look, I think it's ultimately up to the TO. I mean, players, when they come to the event, have to be decent human beings. But, it's really up to the TO.
Big if on that.
It's really up to the TO to set not just the rules, and we can talk about that, but set the tone of the event. Like, that's probably the biggest thing I'm trying to do when I write a pack. Not necessarily what are the specific rules going to be for this event, but what is the tone going to be for the event. So, I do try and set a tone that is inclusive of this, has historical war gamers feel that they can come because there's some controls, but they still understand it's a competitive event, and yet has competitive people come but they know that it's not open slather, and they know that I'm going to check lists and impose some limits. So it's not quite a middle of the road, and I think it's important to say. I mean, I sort of mentioned the fact that you're getting these competitive players coming over from 40K, and I don't want that to sound negative because it pushes us. I think the historical war game community can be a little bit conservative. You may be surprised. And so we can keep doing the same thing, and we can do it very conservatively, but having competitive players come in and say, look, can we do this? It's not going to break the game. It's just going to make it more interesting. Has certainly made me push how I run tournaments, and I think that's really great. But at the end of the day, it's up to the TO. Like I've always said, I run events a certain way. And one of the reasons I stepped back from running events after 5.5 years was to give someone else in Australia a go to see if they wanted to set events up in a different kind of way and run things in a different kind of way. Because I was, I knew some of the competitive players chafed against the restrictions I put in place. So it was an opportunity for a new TO to get up and say, look, we're going to do things differently. It's going to be open slather. So I don't have a problem with that. And I've played in open slather events. I got crushed, but that's, I'm good at running events, but apparently I'm not very good at actually playing BA. I don't mind that as long as those expectations are clear when the TO sets out what the event is going to be, whether that's through the pack or the advertising or whatever. But as long as everyone knows what they're coming to, I don't mind what it is. But I don't think there's one size fits all, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, totally agree. What Russ and Jacob, what are your thoughts on the onus? Peter is basically saying it is a lot on the TO, and especially I think kind of vocalizing that to the community before the event helps to kind of keep that stuff, the feel badsies down if you're coming for a different type of play on the game. Russ and Jacob, what are your thoughts and examples that you've seen kind of with that on the onus?
Ideally, it's on the player, but it's not in the end and the reason is everyone has a subjective view on what's a thematic, themed, nice list and what's cheese from hell, and sometimes people just don't get it. So I'll give an example of that. We had a tournament a few years ago. This guy kept giving me this list that had like 5 flamethrowers in it and was clearly built, US list, clearly built to just kill for a themed event. And I kept bouncing it. And I think I bounced it the 4th time. And he was arguing it's a themed list. I'm like, no, you're not taking US Rangers with fight. It's not happening. And in the end, I sent him a refund. And it was only when I actually sent him a refund, he suddenly contacted me and said, what are you doing? I went, I don't think this is the event for you. I went, it'd be great, come to the next one, but not this one. I think TOs need to do that a lot more than we do. Because if you let a bad list in, it gives such a bad feeling for the people who play against it. And don't get me wrong, war gamers will moan. We will all moan, oh, my opponent's list was cheesy. Yeah, we all do it. And probably the list's fine. But we need to be stronger on that. The other thing I'd say is, unfortunately, because people don't deal with the subjective element very well, I think you need to actually write some limitations sometimes. And a hard limitation, like a very common one down here is maximum of 2 flamethrowers and 1 MLRS system, and that's it. Because if you don't do it, someone is going to argue with you. So if you're up for having an argument, then that's fine. If not, put some limitations in. Or the other thing we do that works quite well is we have thematic points, and we will score, from 0 to 4 based on how themed your list is. And that does a really good job because people will actually send me a list. They get back, say, a 3, and they come back to me and go, oh, what do I need to do to make it a 4? So it's really good in that people are scoring points for it. It's worth that 1.5 wins across 5 games. So it's very meaningful. If you don't turn up with a themed list, you might end up winning 4 or 5 games. You've got no chance of winning the tournament. And that I found has been a good way of managing it.
Oh, perfect points. Jacob, kicking it to you as well.
Yeah, what I found is a lot of times, as everyone's been saying, that you have to really post those restrictions and you have to really use as a TO all the tools in your toolbox. You have to use the system itself. And again, a lot of the more modern systems have that balance built into them where you can face wildly different armies and still be able to actually play your opponent without having too much of a handicap. Russ, I was just about to use that same example. How many flamethrowers do you have in your army? Is it more than a handful? Then yeah, you're kind of cheesing it just a bit. But also, what you should do is gather beforehand what your players are expecting, especially if it's a repeating event. If they're expecting to just go all out crazy, heavens to Betsy, competitive as, broken as, cheesy as, whatever you can be, and the historical stuff gets set aside, run that event for them. Run that event as competitive as possible. Training wheels go off. If people are looking, if either newer players or people are looking to have that more historical themed event, start posing those restrictions. Start making it, okay, you're only allowed army from a certain era. You're only allowed an army from a certain theater. You can only have 1 or 2 flamethrowers. You can only have, you can't have X amount of free units or whatever the case may be. Is really then getting in contact with your players, seeing what they're expecting. And I think that's mainly been an issue out here with how insular a lot of the different gaming communities are. You have to make it as wide as possible to draw as many people in to actually have a successful event. Because a lot of people, unfortunately, out here, for instance, as I was saying, driving 3 hours and still being in Los Angeles, they're dead tired. They don't want to go somewhere or want to have to buy an entirely new army or want to have to do that to not play how they want to play. So making it as open and accessible as possible, if you know your player base and if you know what those players want, I think is the perfect balance to strike, both in terms of making it fun for everyone and in terms of making it fun for everyone.
Yeah. No, great points, Jacob. Russell, I really like your point on restrictions, and I want to kick to you 3 ideas, and I want to kick to the rest of the group here as a follow-up to this question. When I first started doing events, I know military, I know with the AAR concept. My first 3 calls were messages to Brad in Australia, because Brad has run successful events in the past, and he's obviously in the States. Peter, he's got his own podcast, so I was hearing him a lot. So I was like, okay, I need to talk to Brad. Probably should have called Peter, right, if I wanted to do it right. But then the second part of that is Sam at Down Order had a podcast, was talking about events. And then the gentleman that used to run a Cambridge Too Far, the 100-player event in England. Those were my first 3 calls. And I was like, hey, what do you guys do? How do you, I'm getting leagues and I'm getting events. This was over a decade ago. I'm getting these things started. What can help me out? And some of the things that I early on in restrictions that I saw or that help kind of people come to this table is, the people that come to events want something different out of it. And you've all had the theme of it is subjective, whether it's to replicate my old man's unit on the table or to smash face. And so we came up with different awards, which I know you gentlemen have at your events: best painted, best theme, best allied, best axis. There are different smattering of awards that we can do. We try to help out with prize support when we can. It's almost impossible, Peter, I would assume, at an 80-man event for everybody to get something. But if you do it, that's awesome. And then opening it up. I unfortunately let Pandora's box out when we had a few local players that liked the Crete FJ, right? Or some of these early war themed theater selectors in competitive events, and kind of talking for the audience here, a niche army that doesn't look OP or overpowering. And so I was kind of like, hey, yeah, I'll let theater selectors. And as soon as you open that door, right, you've got a lot of scale creep with dual Stalingrad platoons. And so as a way to combat that, early on in my 1250 events, I would say, okay, theater selectors allowed or multiple platoons. And so that normally nerfs, the benefits of the dual units in theater selectors to some degree. And so that was another thing that we did. And then victory points. One of the biggest complaints, because I was trying to bring a bunch of historical players onto the competitive scene, to these event scenes with me and game them, was, okay, why is a Piat team the same victory point as a king tiger. And, like when you take a dice from some of the meeting engagement in different scenarios. And one of the things that we did is we wanted people to kind of keep that mindness of the loss of unit and those things. And not to totally undercut horde armies, right? Or to say the value of this is over it. Sometimes that's all in the strategy of how a different army plays on the table, is the swarm or the horde. And so we came up with different points, like a small team is worth 1 point. Armor class of 8 or below is worth 2, and a king tiger is worth 3. A squad maybe is worth 2 points, and it helped to kind of alleviate that. But these restrictions that we put on events, and they just kind of helped people get more about, hey, this is the event, this is the tone, as Peter said, and I think setting that early on. What are other things that you guys have done as far as any of those restrictions, or to help kind of let everyone know what the tone is?
I'll jump in again. Sorry for going first again, guys. One issue, though, it's all very well to set a tone, but the problem is there are a group of players out there who just do not get it or do not care. And we have this issue in the UK. So we have events. BHGS runs events, and they say in their pack for bold action, you should bring a themed historical army. And because it's not a set rule, there are players who will say, screw that, this is a competition, I want to win the prize, I'm bringing my Gurkha Para, Dacre Stuart list, or my Polish cavalry, or whatever it is. They will just bring it and say, I don't care what you're asking me to do, I'm going to ignore it. And then they will argue with you when you push back and say, whoa, what's the problem? You're not. So I sadly, what do? You either ban those people, outright ban them, which has happened in other occasions, or you have to be clear on exactly what your rule set is, even to the point where on the theatre selector, you ban certain theatre selectors. There are other solutions that, you can deliberately pair those players in round one. That's not a bad solution, but it still means some of them are going to go out and smash people. So,
they're in the
so
room.
that's a major issue. Yeah, they're in the room. Exactly, they're in the room and they're not playing nice. So that's a major issue. And that is, their behaviour is perfectly fine, no holds barred competition. But the problem is some of them will deliberately just say, I don't care. And that has actually affected tournaments, because I think they have got a lot more competitive in the UK over the last 10 years because of people doing that. So other players go, you know what? I'm fed up of turning up with my FSJ Italy list and getting smashed. I'm going to go buy some Gurkhas. I've definitely seen that happen, which is a concern. So as TOs, at the risk of being accused of gatekeeping, whatever that stupid term means, I do think we have to be very clear on what we're allowing. I think also on your points, double platoon and theatre selectors are much, much stronger. Their win rate is through the roof compared to single platoon. So the risk of that is you might have newbie players come in and they're just going to build a single platoon because they're new to the game. And then there is an argument for bouncing weak lists, for saying to a new player, I think you might want to do this, might want to do that, and helping them.
Cold-blooded, right? Yeah.
It is cold-blooded, but I don't want you turning up and having 5 bad games and going, I hate this hobby, I'm never doing it again. So I will advise people sometimes. BritCon, a few years ago, the GT, so the Warlord GT a few years ago, they split it in 2. They had a competitive section and a friendly section. That I thought was quite a good idea. The problem is it didn't quite work because a couple of the people in the friendly selection still brought multi-lists that weren't comped. And guess what?
Is what you're telling me?
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing? Go and play in the other section. I just think they wanted to basically seal club people. You do get them, I'm afraid. On your point on points per kill, that is very common in Europe. All the Spanish championship games are run on that basis. You add up the number of points you've killed rather than working out dice. And the German tournaments I've been to have done the same thing. So that's their solution to that problem.
Peter,
shut up now.
Look, unfortunately in Australia, and some people may not like it, but we established a bolt action mafia pretty early on, and sort of set a tone, certainly on the east coast of Australia, where certain things were just not done. And it was sort of reinforced at Cancon. I never allowed theatre selectors until last year, and I did some other things to balance that. Always, you were never more than 2 flamethrowers, 1 multi-launcher, limited the number of Gurkhas. So look, and players were quite happy with that, I think. And it just because everyone knew what the tone was, everyone knew what to expect. So look, they were quite comfortable with that. But I guess it's like Russell said, there's always some people who just want to push the envelope because they want to win, or that's the way they want to play. And I think that it's one of the things about being a TO that, a lot of that falls on your shoulder. You have to, if you want to maintain the integrity of your event or the event you're trying to hold, you have to knock back those lists. And that causes a lot of drama. And it becomes wearing after a time. And I think one thing that players forget, whether you're a competitive player or a historical player, you ultimately need a TO to put on an event. And if you're constantly giving the TO grief because you think some lists are too strong or you're not allowed to take the list you want, at the end of the day, the TO is just going to go, look, why am I doing this? I don't need that sort of stress in my life. So I just think that's something players need to keep in mind. But a lot of it does fall on the TO. You've got to say that, look, this list isn't what this event is about. You have to resub. And I also agree with Russell that sometimes you have to tell players, look, this looks like a great list. It's very historically themed, but I just have to warn you, you're not going to do very well with it in terms of placing highly. If you're comfortable, you just want to play 5 games and show off your beautifully painted army, which some people do. Had a guy who had absolutely beautiful Dutch East Indies Dutch Java list, beautifully painted. I indicated to him I didn't think it was particularly competitive. He said, that's fine. I just want to show off my army to people. And that's great. I love it. But, a lot of, as I say, it's on the TO to do that sort of management. And that can make events, that's a lot of work and pressure on your TOs.
Sadly, it can kill events. You mentioned Steve, Cambridge Too Far.
Yep.
So Cambridge Too Far, for background, was an event. It was the biggest in the UK. It was 100 players, 50 tables. Right, it was an amazing event. 1 day of gaming. Because it's only 3 games, you get very random outcomes in terms of winners and whatnot. But one of the things Steve said to me, because that event's dead, it died several years ago. And one of the reasons was, obviously, organising something like that is a lot of effort. And one of the problems was, I know Steve was fed up of having to deal with certain players and just constantly bounce a list. And he was a bit like my example. He was telling me there were certain groups of players. He was bouncing a list 4 or 5 times. And it's like he said he didn't need to do it anymore. He was fed up with it. And you can understand that. And he was like, you know what, I'm done with this. So I agree with Peter completely. You need TOs to put on events. But there's a small group of players that if we don't get on top of it, they will kill the fun but competitively themed events. Yeah. So it is something we've got to be careful of.
No,
that's the biggest poison when it comes to war games is the moment you hear someone say, whether it's a TO or a player, this isn't fun anymore, it starts dying. It starts getting poisoned, whether it's poisoning other players, whether it's poisoning people from wanting to run those games anymore. I definitely agree. It's definitely an onus on the TO to try and nip that in the bud in the beginning. It's obviously up to players to not be absolute jerks, as some of them still tend to be. But especially if you're running the same tournament or same event over like the same thing, you start running players and you start getting that feel of the power game and the power creep, and then constructing your list restrictions or constructing your mission types or constructing the tournament to counter that without feeling like you're specifically targeting a person. I've done a lot more smaller events out here, nothing compared to 80, 100 people. I've been to a couple of those. I haven't actually run any of those, but from the ones I have run, you start getting a feel of those kind of people and getting a feel of the list they would bring. With second edition bolt action, particularly Romanians, I had this one guy out here who was like, no, I just love Romanians. Not because I can fit 2 tanks into the thing and get a free artillery. That's not the reason at all. Really not. And you start thinking, you only have so much free stuff. You can only do this. You can only do that. And when it comes to the victory points per kill, what I found a lot more times, what I've liked a lot more is victory points, not per kill, but per objective, and making the different missions and everything like that more objective based, so that someone we can get a ton of order dice kills off of won't be as behind the times as someone who you can only get a couple order dice kills off of, but they'll have a lot more trouble holding the objectives. So working the objectives, and again, it all really depends on the mission. It always depends on the tournament pack you use. I find it's a lot more easier way of curbing the vastly different points list or the vastly different order dice lists.
So, no, I've got a follow-up question. So clearly, I'm not a TO. I've not run these kind of events, so I'm coming from the player's perspective. But kind of, it's very clear from all your answers that the primary onus is on the TO. But talking specifically about bolt action and the fact that they are coming out with a new edition, do you all feel like there is a responsibility from the rules writer, especially when they realize that a major market for them are these tournaments and this tournaments I'll play, to adjust the rules to account for a lot of these problems that you guys are referring to, or if the fact that they just don't consider it at all, is that a missed opportunity for them? Should they adjust the rules to account for this huge player base and the problems you're all seeing, or is there no responsibility on them? Do y'all have any thoughts on that? Not saying if you've seen the rules or not, but do you expect the 3rd edition to account for these problems?
I think that is one of the actual biggest things for companies to make a successful war game, period, is you have to listen to the players. Both in terms of what they want, both in terms of what balance they have. You know, I've seen a lot of games explode because of how much the company listens to the players. I've seen a lot of war games die on the vine because of how little the company listens to the players. So balance being built into the system from the get-go is definitely something that eases everyone's burdens on the bottom end of it all, both in terms of TOs and players. Having that balance built in where, because there's people out there who try to break stuff, people out there who try to find loopholes, people out there who try to shove those 5, 6, 7 flamethrowers into their list and still come under the 1250 points. There's always going to be people who break that. If you come out with a finely tuned war game and have as little of those loopholes as possible, then that actually makes it a lot easier for everyone.
Look, I think there's an obligation on wargaming companies to fix what I would call the obvious problem. So when a unit is just so completely out of whack because of points or what it does, whatever. But look, if I knew what made a good war game, I'd set up a wargaming company and release a set of rules. So I'll take the rules as they are. I'd just say, look, for TOs, for events in particular, TOs, don't be afraid to change things. Like, don't be afraid to put in place restrictions. And like, I've changed what units do, like particularly with the MMG. Like, there's been various things tried in Australia, giving additional pins, giving additional shots to try and fix the MMG rule. So I just say to TOs, depending on the type of event you want to run, don't be afraid to put in place restrictions or to make some rules changes to give the type of game you want your event to be playing. I know that will cause some people to be unhappy, why are you messing around with it, yada, yada, you just play the rules as written. But look, as I always say, if you don't like the type of event I'm running, please feel free not to come along or to run your own event. And I'd love to come to your event because I don't get to play enough because there's not enough events going on with TOs willing to run them. So, but yeah, that would be my main advice. Look, there's going to be problems with whatever rule. No set of wargaming rules are perfect. And I think, again, back to the TOs, don't be afraid to adjust things for the type of event you want to run.
Russ, any thoughts on that question as well?
Yeah, so I'll pick up on three things there. So first of all, it's in terms of adjusting your event. absolutely feel free to do it, and feel free to adjust rules. Lots of people do it. Yeah, every event to some degree does it. They set a points limit, for example. They're saying 1,000, 1 to 50. That's not set for Warlord. Warlord are very, very comfortable with players doing that. They're very clear. They're not precious at all about the rule set. They're very happy for people to make any changes they want to make the game work better in certain environments. I agree with Peter completely. We've adjusted. We've got an event in October running V3, so I've got to be careful what I say to some degree. I'm not a raider, so I'm still on an NDA apparently. But all I know is we have adjusted Gurkhas, so they've got a new rule called Kukri, which is nothing to do with V3. So it's not. This is not a leak. It's our rule. Basically, they no longer get the Scary Blighters rule. They're going to win a draw, which is from the Italy campaign book. And if they're fighting fanatics and it's a draw, you fight again, but they get to queue an extra fanatic, a guy in the combat. And that's one way of balancing a certain unit, you know? And then on V3, in terms of does Warlord care, there's been a lot of releases. And I think you said earlier, based on those releases, you felt spamming, as it were, taking lots of one unit is clearly going to be a bigger problem. And that probably indicates to you whether they worry about tournaments or not, or whether they worry about the game overall. And I'll leave it at
that. Russ, I like that. The quiet answer to kind of, you say a lot when you just kind of point to something and you don't expound on it. So I do agree with your understanding of that. Great points on everything from what everybody said, and I think the underpinning thing is the TO is involved a lot in this. And again, going back to the audience on who we're hoping is listening to this, is whether it's the veteran competitive player or the casual historical player, and looking at events under the guise of the globe, right, and where everybody is going. I want to switch the questions 5 and 6 that I'd sent you guys, because I think it ties in here directly. You know, a lot of onus is on the TO. You gentlemen, you know, for the tiny events that I've run and the leagues that I've done, it's a lot of calculating on a spreadsheet, doing all of this, trying to grow the community, and for selfish reasons in my own part, to have more opponents. And so, you know, how and why do you still do this when you have a lot of responsibility? You know, obviously you have a passion for it. It's not the salary. I'm going to say it's probably not the salary, but through the three of you, you know, what about this is kind of driven you to be the host and organizer of these events, and you know, why be involved in it? And this is, you know, maybe under the light of people who are listening, right? That are, whether they're in Australia, England, California, or anywhere in between those places, you know, why get into this and why put up with the flack? Are the benefits kind of worth the reward on that?
Yes. I mean, at the end of the day, if you really boil it down to, like, if I don't run events, who else is going to run events? Like, you need people to step up and run events. And I want to play in bolt action events. I love bolt action. And if I'm not willing to do it, how can I expect other people to do it? And I know that's not universal, but that's the reality, that some people have to step up and run these events if other people are going to also do the same thing so I can play. So to me, it really boils down to that simple equation. I love bolt action. You know, I want to grow the community. But at the end of the day, probably the biggest driver is that, you know, if I'm not willing to run events, why would I expect other people to run events which I can go and play in? So that's really what at the end of the day, what motivates me to run an event.
Great answer. Russ and Jacob, your thoughts?
It's definitely the love of the game. I mean, I know that sounds like a silly cliche answer, but it's the absolute love of the game. You know, it takes one thing to be a player, but it takes an entirely different thing to be a TO. To actually love what you're doing and love playing. What I love the most specifically is I love seeing people have fun and the smile on people's faces. I love seeing the community grow. That's my biggest thing. If I'm doing it wrong, the community shrinks. If I'm doing it wrong, people aren't having fun, people aren't enjoying their time. And it not only kills a tournament, but it'll kill a convention. You know, the convention attendance drops if an event isn't happening anymore, or lower numbers of people come, or anything of the sort. So bringing that smile to those people's faces and teaching them and helping them grow and running through their lists with them and all that kind of stuff. That's how I get mad kicks out of doing all this. Sometimes, and if you're doing it right, it's actually a lot easier to get that own, I guess you could say, dopamine rush than getting your butt whipped 5 times in a row by a competitive player if you're playing in the game. You get that dopamine rush of everyone having fun, and you go, I did a good job. I'm the real winner here. You all had fun.
Russ, thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with Jacob there. It's there is something really enjoyable about a successful event, but primarily for me it was kind of 2 things. The first thing was an awareness that there were people out there running events, and it's a lot of hard work. And it was kind of, well, I was in a position where I could contribute, so I could help out as well and run a couple of events, and I decided to, because we need more events. One of the issues we've got with Bolt Action is, I think in the UK at least, we just don't have enough events, which is probably preventative for some 40k players flipping, because at the moment, if you play 40k, you can probably play twice a month, no problem, at a regional event. Good luck doing that in Bolt Action. But the other reason I did specifically WoW as well, rather than complain and bitch about other people's events, I took a view, well, if you don't like it, go and do your own one and fix the things that you think don't work. I think it was that famous wargamer Gandhi. He said something like, be the change in the world that you want to see. And there's an element of that going, look, I don't like the way they do that event, so we're going to do something similar, but we're going to make the changes we think it needs.
He played non-violent war games where he, like, you roll for a starvation roll or something, I guess. I hope you surrender. I'm not going to eat for this turn. To
be fair, he was a stretcher bearer, I think, in the Boer War. So
pretty high speed. He's going to be my medic now in my British Army. So
brilliant.
Great questions. As we kind of come to we're at a little over an hour and a half mark here, and I'm going to combine some of these last questions to help us get on time and get to our sections. It's been a great discussion so far about kind of highlighting pros and cons, issues with events, but combining some of these last questions together and posing them to all of you. What is something that you would either highlight or leverage to a historical gamer to get into competitive wargaming, and what is something you would highlight and leverage to have a competitive, whether it's 40k sci-fi or wargamer from another genre, get into competitive historical wargaming? Trying to get both of those people into Bolt Action, Saga, Flames, whatever the case may be. But what is something that you would either try to highlight or point out to either one of those groups in order to get them in?
Look, for Bolt Action in particular, or historical in general?
Historical competitive events. So what is something you would highlight to the casual Napoleonic player that's at your table that plays the Portabra, whatever game it is, and that person that plays, Nurgle or whatever 40k army? What is something that you would say to each one of those individuals to come over to Bolt Action, historical competitive kind of wargaming?
Well, I'll go with the historical player to start with. And I would say it's kind of the what if. It's like you are reenacting, you're playing your army and you're playing these famous battles. How many times have you actually won as the Austrians against the French when you've reenacted these games? Would you like to occasionally win, maybe? Or if you're running British Singapore Army in December 1941, would you actually like to play a scenario where you might win? So that's part of it. The other thing is just the range of games you get. If you can only own 3 or 4 armies normally. I know some people got much bigger lists. I've gone crazy. But it's like, well, if you stay historical, you are only ever going to run your US Marines against the Japanese island force. But if you go into a tournament, you can run them against Germans, against British, against Russians. And I know some people don't like that, and that's fine. I completely get it. But for a lot of people, it's fun, because you're never going to see these army lists ever otherwise. So that's a big draw, I think, for historical wargamers, just to experience more armies and more situations. And I'll hand over to the other guys for the 40k players.
I think I'll steal that 40k example, because again, being an actual reenactor as well, it's something that's really near and dear to me. Is okay, you played all these other guys. There's fluff for your armies, right? There's fluff for 40K. There's fluff for fantasy. There's fluff for infinity, whatever the case may be. How about learning something that really matters? How about learning your actual history? Unfortunately, nowadays, the very few World War II veterans that are left are dying by the dozen. Pretty soon, we won't have access to that history at all. Pretty soon, a lot of people will completely forget about it. It's keeping that history alive, keeping that history fresh in your minds. Even if you're playing a completely broken list, you can still, by osmosis, get that actual history and learn a bit about your unit, learn a bit about your army, learn a bit about the countries involved. Maybe they'll spark you to learn more into actual history. And it matters so much more than any kind of fluff from any kind of fictional war game, is learning your actual history, going back all the way to from biblical times with Saga and everything like that, all the way up to modern times with World War II and bolt action. Is learning that history and keeping that history alive should be, not the priority, but at least one of the secondary or tertiary considerations. Is learning more about what you're doing, and by learning more about what you're doing, not only will you be a better war gamer, but you also be a better, well-rounded individual. So I definitely think that learning about history and internalizing that as you play your armies is one of the great things about moving from fictional war games to historical war games.
Jacob, that's an awesome point. I think you're in line of kind of how my hobby trajectory went. My father, would fence me off from 40K. When you go to historical conventions, it wasn't an option for me. He would, he's a huge historical war gamer, plays millions of different periods, has armies for him, and he would go to a board. I remember even as a kid, a map of the globe, and he'd be like, we're about to play Waterloo. We're about to play Chancellorsville in the American Civil War. We're about to play Marts and Moore in ECW. And he's like, here's these people that lived. They really existed. Here's how these borders were, invented for countries. Here's kind of the effects. Let's see the tension kind of on the table. So, Jacob, that really resonates, I think, with historical gamers. And, hopefully that does bring over some 40K people. On that, going to any other kind of alibis on that, on things that you would say from any of the three of you to the competitive, sci-fi fantasy players that are coming over, or any other historical players?
So, look, I think for the historical player, from my perspective, it's about, what I tell them is you're going to see, you're obviously playing because you love history. And so you're going to see a lot more at a competitive event. Like, whether you win or lose or not, you're going to see a lot of lovely armies. You're going to see a lot of people who are dying to talk to you about their Fallschirmjäger from Tunisia on the 1st of May, 1943, who, you're just going to connect with these people. You're going to enjoy it. And look, I agree with Jacob that, when talking to a sci-fi game player, I think talking about the actual connection with history and the chance to engage on that's important. But look, if you're trying to do the hard sell, I mean, the thing we've also already mentioned is that it's a lot cheaper than most playing World War II. You're not locked into any specific company's IP. There are hundreds of companies that produce World War II figures. They're beautiful. I love the Warlord ones, but I love a lot of other ones as well. It's, a lot of variety, a lot of opportunities. You'd think being historical, it would be more constrained, but from what I've seen, it's far more open playing a World War II game than it is playing certain sci-fi games in terms of what you can model and what you can do and who you can buy stuff from. And I would argue too that most modern war games, certainly Bolt Action and some of the ones like Saga, are just a more modern set of rules. And to be honest, I think are actually more enjoyable to play. Like I So without wishing to sound like I'm bashing anybody, I just think there's an obvious sell to get people into BA, which I think is why we have been so successful recently. That people are looking at it and going, "Wow, I can buy several armies for the cost of what I'm buying one army for in other games." And I've got a lot of variety about how I play that army and how I paint that army. And it connects people to the history, which I think ultimately then sucks them in and sort of keeps drawing them into historical games, because they build their first army and then they go, oh, but while I was reading about this army, I read about this battle they had against this certain other army, and that looked really interesting. I'll read a bit more about that. And I just think people just get sucked deeper and deeper down into historical games.
No,
Yeah, agreed. Just on that as well. Our law is a lot better than 40k law, although there's more rivet counting in 40k, I think, over their law. But the other really good point is I was just thinking about people who've recently come over, and I had a 40k player who started playing Bolt Action and loves it, and he said to me his favourite thing about it was the game system means it's a much more intense game. And I was like, well, really? Why? And he said there are long periods of a 40k game, where maybe 40 minutes or so, where you're doing nothing and you're just waiting for your opponent to roll, and all you can do is roll a save, and you wait and you wait and you wait, and you can't even plan for another turn because you need to see what's going to happen. And he said it's boring just standing there watching someone play. You're not really playing. Whereas with Bolt Action, you have to be on your game for every second of that 2.5 hour or 2 hour game.
Oh yeah, the mind melt at the end of the event, whether you're a participant or I'm sure a TO, how many times you're being called over to help with rules queries. No, it's been a great discussion. Closing in on that 10-minute mark for our 2 hours. I think that we've posed that to the audience, and the idea is, we've used experience from across the globe with everybody kind of having a lot of great experience and different events, different metas, as the term will be, and ways that, people who are either hopeful participants to come over or whether TOs, I think we've posed those questions and we've gotten some great answers from you gentlemen on, if you're curious about coming into competitive historical wargaming, which can sometimes have negative connotations, or whether you're ready to say, okay, that was a crap event, I'm going to run my own, right? And so hopefully that is what has sparked, you gentlemen, as well as playing and all the participants in playing, but hopefully it helps to continue to push the hobby forward. We'll look and we'll see how many more events spring out of this, and TOs and organizers, and hopefully even more players. We want a broad church, as Brad says, Peter, down there. We want a lot of people to come in and hopefully get an enjoyable experience, regardless of why they come over. And that's our goal, really, in this podcast, as well as talking with you guys today. So I'll kick it out for the group for any kind of last minute alibis, and then we'll move into our next kind of closing sections before we sign off. Anything else that you'd like for the audience to know or hear about competitive historical wargaming?
It's a lot of fun. You'll meet a great group of people. If anything we've said today seems scary or deters you, we said it wrong. You will have a great time no matter what your skill level is. And particularly Bolt Action, I think the first thing I said, it's an amazing community. You'll hit one or two competitive players, but even those competitive players are often running a beautifully painted World War II army. Yeah. And oftentimes I haven't mind getting my face kicked in because I've enjoyed looking at the army so much. So look, try it out. You'll enjoy it. It's a great community, and you'll get a great 5 games of Bolt Action or however many there are in the event.
Awesome. Russ,
yeah. Sorry. Even with what Peter was saying, yeah, there's going to be those competitive players. Yeah, they're going to have these big stompy lists. They're nasty. From the top to the bottom, from the TO, to even those competitive players, the friendliness, I've seen all of them in Bolt Action compared to a number of other war games. You might have a lot more toxic players just in general. That person who just stomped your face in with that crazy list, they'll immediately turn around and help you list build. They'll immediately turn around and say, hey, look, this is what worked for me. This is what didn't. This is the problem a bit that you had with your list. This is how I can help. They'll bring you into the fold no matter what. And TOs, from my perspective, being a TO a lot of times, and from seeing a lot of other TOs, they're always happy to teach too. They're always happy to, if you, before the tournament, if you need your list run by them, they'll go, hey, yeah, I can help you with this. Or you want to say, I tried this out. I don't know how it's working. Oh, yeah, no, I'll help you tweak this and move that and rearrange this unit to give you another order dice or whatever the case may be. the sense of community is something you won't find pretty much anywhere else. It's amazing.
Russ, closing
Yeah,
thoughts.
I completely agree. A really good way of doing it, if you've got a friend you play bold action with, like go together and make a day of it. It's really good fun. If you're uncertain on what kind of tournament it is, just contact the TO. TOs are really keen to help new players come into it. Even ask for advice from them if you want on your lists or whatever you're doing. And then when you get there, you, as Peter says, and Jacob says, people are really friendly. My first ever competitive game was at Cambridge Too Far, which is a friendly atmosphere. And I played, funny enough, I realised who it was a while later. I played a guy in the UK called Dan Lane, who is arguably the best UK bold action player. And I was a complete newbie, and he smashed me. But you know what? He couldn't have been nicer or more helpful with me. He was a real gent in that game and lovely. And you'll find that, as I said, I've played a couple hundred competitive games. I've only had 2 or 3 that I was like, ugh, wish I hadn't played. Even the strong players, they will be, generally speaking, really nice, and they will help you with roles and give you advice. So definitely go and enjoy it. You'll love it. You won't look back.
Awesome points. Rob, I'll kick it over to you to go to our next section, which will be kit bag, to the TOs here.
Yeah. So as regular listeners know, we do kit bag, and that's just usually something that Matthew and I use in our hobby kits to help us make life easier in the hobby world. But since we have this opportunity, we'd like from each of you guys to tell us something as a TO in running events. It might be a tip or trick not only for running bolt action tournaments, but just events in general that makes life easier and helps you in that endeavor. So if anyone wants to start, and just what's your trick that you want to offer to the audience?
Whether it be,
We've all gone silent. We don't want to tell anyone.
you always have a helper, a good rules pack. You know.
Help is the number one thing. Don't try and do it all yourself. If you can get a couple of friends or club mates to come and help, often players will even help. So if you're starting for the first time and you're worried about terrain, let people know. They'll bring tables for you. They really will. But help's the number one. And then on the day, ideally, if you can have somebody scoring, or if you're doing the scoring and keeping on top of the matchups and stuff, have at least one other person who can go around and just help and check on things and deal with problems as they come up. So help, I would say, is the number one thing.
Nice.
Yeah, 100% agree with Russell, but I'll for my offering, I'll go the other end of the spectrum, and that is super glue. Always have a couple of tubes of super glue with you. Someone will drop an army tray, someone will knock a sniper off the top of the tower and it will lose its head, and they will come to the TO and go, have you got any glue? So always bring a couple of tubes of super glue with you.
Nice.
Perfect. Jacob.
Definitely building on from that too, bring your own kit. Think if you're going as a player to a tournament, what will you bring? You bring an extra set of dice, you'll bring an extra set of order dice, you'll bring an extra tape measure, you'll bring your own army. What I always do is, even if I'm solely running a tournament and not even taking part in anything, not being the extra matchup, if there's only like 7 or an odd number of people, is bring an extra army. That way, someone wanders by looking, you can sink your hooks into them and say, hey, look, I got this here for you. Bring anything. Sit down, have fun. And also, something that's not physical is, I would say, willingness to teach. There have been, I don't think I've run many of my tournaments at all without at least 1 or 2 people being either completely new or needing to learn how to play or whatever the case may be. Sit down with them. Pay particular attention to that table. I know the larger games with the 40, 50 tables that you guys have might not be as easy a thing to do, but be willing to teach and willing to help clarify the rules and say, hey, look, if it's okay with both of you guys, I'll help you guys both out tactically because you're both completely new people. And these are some tactics that work. These are some things that can go on. And that grows both of them on an even footing, on an even playing ground. But it still grows both of them as players. So I definitely say bringing willingness to teach.
Great.
Okay, excellent points, gents. Me and Windhurst are gonna add that to our kit bag for demo games and events as well. The last section that we talk about as we're continuing to push through for time is our scouting report, and we talk about kind of what's coming next on our hobby table in our hobby space. And so here recently, we just rolled up a bolt action league that was going in through Tennessee, Kentucky, and a couple of outlying states. We had like over 30 players over 8 months, and you build the army at 250. And so it's been awesome to watch players grow and build. And that's concluded. We have an event in September. So I'm looking forward to that kind of on my local scene. As far as what else is going on in my hobby space on my scouting report, I'm one of the historians for Market Garden for the 101st Airborne Division. So I'll be in Holland this time next week. I look forward to, if there's a bolt action person out there, I'm going to try to pack my army in a rucksack. We'll see how tight that goes. But if there's, I look forward to kind of engaging with the hobby community in the places I go with the military. So if you're out there, drop a line on this podcast. Please let me know. Love to kind of pick up a game. And hopefully I scheduled my flight for a little bit later when I'm coming out of Market Garden, I think at the end of September. And I'm going to try to get down to Waterloo. So any hobby stores or any people out there that are in that community, please, let me know, and look forward to kind of moving forward with the hobby and progressing on some of the armies I've let go as I've grinded on my 101st here for that league. Kicking it over to Windhurst, and then we'll go through the group. What's kind of on your scouting report?
Yeah, so I'm still working on this project for the Air Force. So for you guys who don't know, I'm essentially trying to bring wargaming down to the unit level in the Air Force. It's something we do in the Army and the Marines. Historically, you'll know that's kind of where it comes from. But I've been building out a set of rules as a training tool. And then now that I finally got some more free time, I had done a charity thing where I'm supposed to be painting epic Napoleonics. I never thought I'd do Napoleonics until somebody gave me their entire army because they had medical issues that prevented them from painting anymore. And so I raised a little over £1,000 towards the MS Society. And I've been so busy over the last 2 months, I haven't touched them, but I'm finally be able to get back on them. So hopefully I'll start cranking out. They gave me the entire Waterloo set, as well as 3 extra boxes of cavalry, extra boxes of infantry, a massive army. And I was like, okay, well, I'll do this for charity, paint it. And so it's finally I'm back onto it. But kick it over to you, Peter. What's on you for upcoming games, upcoming projects? What are you working on?
So the next big bolt action event in Australia is known as Moab. It's in the first weekend in October, so I'm desperately painting up an army for that. I'm taking Home Guard because this will be my last V2 event, and I took Home Guard, was the first army I took to Moab many, many years ago. So Home Guard will go out with a bang in V2. And then Brad is got Operation Bear at the end of October, and I'm still hoping I might be able to get to that, although interstate travel at this time of year is a bit tough, but hopefully I'll be able to get to that as my first V3 event.
Nice.
Awesome.
Russ, what you got for us?
On the painting table, as it were, I'm busy painting lots of heavy weapons teams. I think we all know why that is. But I've never seen so many US Marine medium orders in my life, honestly. And annoyingly, there's only one set, so I'm trying to cut heads off and stuff to make them look different. So that's the painting desk. But actually, most of my time's being filled getting ready for World Open War. So that's on the 26th and 27th of October. It's the first, to my knowledge, the first kind of biggish tournament running V3, which has caused all sorts of problems, as you can imagine. What I'm currently doing, I've just sent to the player base army lists. I'm starting to send them the army lists, like what units can you use, and where is the reference for the unit. But I can't send them the points yet because that might make me trigger an issue, should we say? So I'm very busy writing army lists so that we can actually play, because otherwise we can't even build armies.
Yeah, that must be true. Jacob, what you got?
Coming up for me, personally, I am, as a lot of people here, rearranging, reinforcing, getting ready for 3rd edition coming out for Bolt Action. Tweaking army lists and then making sure I have the minis to be able to field those army lists. For events, there's always Strategicon. Again, it happens 3 times a year. Labor Day Memorial and President's Day. An absolute fun event at the LAX Hilton. There's also Mini Wars and Sand Wars coming up, which are both HMGS PSW events, the Historical Miniature Gaming Society Pacific Southwest events. They are primarily, obviously you can tell from the name, historically focused. So that'll be a great time to go to and a great time to play in.
Great.
No, that's gents. I just want to thank you again for taking the time out of your day. We're looking at midnight in Australia, midday for you Limeys with Russ and Rob and Jacob again for waking up so early to be on here. Again, we're apologize that Andrew couldn't be on here. We'll have to do a follow-up with him. It really it was a great discussion from my vantage point with you gents, and to talk and to get the meta out there from the globe on competitive historical wargaming, getting after it, why people should either come into it, and why their concerns maybe will fade away as they learn that gaming area and genre a little bit better. And so whether you're in Australia, England, on the West Coast, on the East Coast, it is a good community, and I think you've heard that here, throughout the globe. It's a great community, and there is a plethora of people willing to help and kind of help you get after it. So if you're on the fence, hopefully you're not on the fence anymore, and you'll dive right in and enjoy one of these gentlemen's tournaments or events, or maybe you've been playing for a minute and you'll get started in running your own. So Peter and Russ and Jacob can play in yours wherever you're at. But we really appreciate you listening to this podcast. We hope that you interact and comment with us. Let us know your thoughts as we all stand poised for V3. And can't thank you guys enough once again for being here. So without further ado, grab your spear, your shield, your belt-fed machine gun, or your order dice, or your tournament pack, and join us on the next episode of On Patrol. Thanks so much. Over and out.